Okay. Well, let's see. Good morning, everybody. I'm going to give this a go. I'm going to try to put a webcam on and see if you guys, can see me. Welcome to a little experiment we're having with our TA call today. I don't plan to have, if you are online and you can see me, hello. If you're just on the phone, that's also fine. I don't plan to have this webcam on for long, mostly because I am going to be fumbling, and I don't want you to see the sort of scared expressions on my face as I'm struggling with technology over the next hour. Those of you who have clicked the link and joined the Collaborate Ultra platform, there is, you can find in the bottom right corner of your screen, there's a little icon for a little bubble, whatever you call those little dialogue bubbles. And if you click on that, you can put a chat in. Just so you know, my skills with Collaborate Ultra are small, and so I can find the chat box. It may be difficult for me, so if you at this point, it would probably be ideal if you just took yourself off mute when you have a question. That would be great. So this call is being recorded in addition to the component that's being done on the visual on Collaborate Ultra. So I'll be sending out a link to for our recording, which will include the audio and the visual. So if anybody after the fact is kind of curious what sort of drawing I may have done, which I will explain it as I do it, but you'll have the recording so you can take a peek at it if you aren't online right now. Okay, so I'm going to take my little camera off mute, but you'll keep hearing me. So we have on the deck today to talk about as our topic, retrospective monthly accounting and transitional computation cycle. And for those of you who are genuinely curious and interested in this, it's official. You are truly a benefit geek. These are terms and concepts that can make most people want to run the other direction, screaming. But these are actually incredibly important concepts. I am a little quiet on my end. Is that better, Terry? I just saw that little chat come in. Can you hear me a little better now? I'm hoping you can hear me a little better. I moved the microphone closer to my mouth. And I'll try to talk a little louder, too. That should hopefully help. These are really important concepts, in particular when it comes to helping folks understand what's going to happen to benefits, the SSI benefit when working. How and when is that check going to change? And that kind of financial planning is really, really helpful for folks so that it's not such a mystery, and so folks feel like they've got more control over the situation. So what you'll see in the PowerPoint slide is that I'm going to walk you through the basics of this concept, retrospective monthly accounting cycle, which is actually, oddly enough, fairly straightforward. It's the second piece of this transitional computation cycle that tends to create a little more confusion and be a little harder to wrap your head around. So we've got examples for all of these things that I'll walk you through, and we'll talk a bit about, sort of how this plays out in real life when you're working with folks. And then I want to come back to you guys and what this means for your work and how you're talking with folks about it, and how this can be really powerful for helping people be proactive in planning for changes. And as I like to say, to stay a step ahead of Social Security. I'm going to warn you, when we get to the piece about the transitional computation cycle, you may feel a little bit like your brain hits a wall. It takes a little bit of time to process it. So this may also be a concept that you over the course of our discussion over the next hour, you feel like you get a portion of it, but not all of it, and that's okay. I feel like it's taken me a couple of years to wrap my head around these concepts. So don't expect it's all going to sink in 1 hour if this is brand new to you or very new to you. But it is something that's good to just keep chipping away at and building your understanding of and comfort level around. And there's even some pieces of the transitional computation cycle and some of the exceptions that throw me for a loop still to this day. So we're just all going to continue to be on this learning curve together. So with that, I'm going to get us started. And I have heard a couple other beeps while I've been kind of getting us some foundation laid for our conversation. Just want to give a quick reminder before I keep going. If you could just please keep your phone line on mute. It sounds like everybody has done that at this point, which is really fantastic. Thank you. If you haven't, if you could mute your phone now, and if you don't have a mute button, you can press *6 on your keypad, and then #6 will unmute you. So, one other logistic, I did send along a short briefing paper that we have in case that's helpful for you as a reference going forward. I mostly just wanted to make sure you knew it was around, and it is on the website in the resources section. So that's what we have in store today. And again, for those on the platform, feel free to pop a chat in the chat box. Just know I am still a little bit new with using the Collaborate Ultra platform, and so I will take a peek at times in the chat box, but I'm not certain I'm able to access all pieces of it right now. So if I haven't responded to something you have in the chat box, just take yourself off mute. All right. So let's get going. So in general, when it comes to the SSI benefit that the person actually receives, usually the amount they receive is based on the income that they had in an earlier, or another way of saying is a previous month. And that process of your SSI check this month being based on your income in a previous, earlier month is known as the retrospective monthly accounting cycle. And so this is what the majority of folks you work with are dealing with. It's this process that is the most common. When it comes to this process, understanding it and how it works, there's a few terms that are important, two concepts that are important to kind of wrap your head around. One is that this month, right now, the month in which the person would be receiving a benefit, there's an eligibility test that the person has to meet to be able to receive whatever benefit they're going to receive this month. And then separate from that, this other concept is that the amount the person gets is, with the retrospective monthly accounting cycle, is actually based on not the income they got last month, but the month before that. So the second month before what we're talking about right now. So we're in the month of May, and in terms of retrospective monthly accounting, the benefit, my SSI benefit amount for May would be based on my income that I received in March. So there's a bit of a delay in how that process works. So it's not like there's an overpayment happening there. And in fact, this is set up so that it, in essence, sort of tries to prevent overpayments from happening. And so let's just sort of pause and think through the logic behind that. So if it's the month of, let's go back to the month of March, and let's say in the month of March, I received my SSI benefit on the first of the month, because that's when SSI comes in. And so let's say I received $750 of SSI in March. And then a week into the month, I land a job. And over the course of that month, I bring in $1,085 in gross wages. Well, that means I had $500 of countable income. And I did a quick little math there. I took 1,085 of gross wages, subtracted 20, subtracted 65, and divided by 2. So that means that if this retrospective monthly accounting cycle didn't exist, I would be $500 overpaid in March. And that's crummy. So instead, the way this RMA system is set up is it accounts for the fact that in the month of March, I don't know how much my income is going to be until I get all the way through the last day of March, through the 31st of March. And once I have that information, I then need a day or two at least to get that to Social Security. So that means, in theory, the soonest I could get them information about my income in March would be April 1st. That's the very soonest. Well, I'm going to be getting an SSI check on April 1st. And so they can't adjust that quickly. So when I give them, if I were to give them my income from March on April 1st, they can't get my April 1st check adjusted. The system just can't move that quickly. So realistically, if I give them my income from March, if I give it to them by April 10th, it gives them enough time to get my check for May adjusted. And that's the logic here. At least there's logic at this point in the process. I can't guarantee I'm going to keep saying there's logic because at a certain point there really isn't. So that's sort of the RMA process. So when you're helping folks think about, when you're giving someone an estimate of how much their SSI is going to adjust when they work, I mean, you don't have to go into the details of this. But when a person is about to start working or did just start working, then it becomes helpful for them to understand the nuances behind this so that they're prepared for what this means. So I'm going to keep us moving here and let's talk about what this means in reality. So in my example I just gave there, we've got these two sort of key months. And I'm going to just make sure you're clear about these 2 months, and then we'll look at an example of how this plays out. So in the scenario I just gave, May is the eligibility, also known as payment month. And so in May, the first process is to make sure, if you look at my income in May, first and foremost, would I even be eligible for a check in May? So there's this first step that has to occur, looking at May and my income in May. And when they're looking at my income in May, they're checking to see if I'm eligible. If I am eligible, so let's say in the month of May I had 1,085 of income still, I technically would be eligible for an SSI check. The amount they end up paying me is based on the budget month, which is March. So there's a two-step process with the RMA. The first is they look at my income in the current month to see, are you even eligible? Would you even be eligible for an SSI benefit right now based on what you got for income this month? If you would be eligible for an SSI benefit, the amount we're going to give you isn't what you got for income this month. What we're going to give you is based on your income in the budget month. So that can be so hard to wrap your head around that what I'd like to do is give you, walk you through this little example here. So in our scenario here, we have John, and I am on slide 5. I apologize for those on the phone. I am on slide 5 on the example. So John's only income in this scenario is $750 at SSI. And then in April, he begins receiving a monthly annuity of $400. And he has no in-kind support and maintenance, which is why he's getting that $750 of SSI. So the only thing coming in, there's nothing coming in before, and now, starting April, there's this $400 annuity payment. So John's payment for June and ongoing is $370. So let's walk through how this works. So bear with me because I'm going to start on the far left-hand side, and I'm going to work our way up to April to see if hopefully this makes sense. So you'll see for the column of January, we've got several pieces of information. So we know for January his countable income in January was 0. He had no other money, just SSI. So the next piece in the column is asking, would he even be eligible based on his countable income for SSI in January? And the answer is yes. He has 0 countable income, and we're going to assume his resources are below the resource limit. So yes, he would be eligible. So he's passed that eligibility test, the first part of the RMA. And so given that, the month that they're going to use, the month of income they're going to use to calculate his benefit this month is November. So the SSI benefit he gets is $750. And it's based on what he would have had for countable income in November, which back in November, it was 0. So then we move to February. And in February, they do the same thing. First, they have to see, would he even be eligible for SSI this month based on his income this month? And in February is 0 countable income. So yes, he would be eligible for SSI this month. So he meets that first criteria of the RMA. He would be eligible for an SSI benefit this month based on his income this month. But the amount he's going to get is going to be based on his income in December. So he's going to get $750, and it's based on what he would have had for countable income in December. So then we look at March. Same thing happens again. 0 countable income in March. So he passes this first test of the RMA, which means based on his income in March, yes, he would be eligible for SSI in March. And so since he would be eligible, he meets that first test, his SSI benefit amount this month, for the month of March, is going to be based on his income from January. And his income from January was 0. 0 countable income gives us a $750 SSI check. So now we look at April, and things get changed up in April. So in April, he now has some income. He got that annuity. And of that $400 annuity, $380 is countable. So based on his income this month, would he be eligible for SSI this month, the month of April? Yeah, he would. He would. But the amount of his SSI this month is not going to be based on that income. The amount of his SSI this month is going to be based on his income in February. So his countable income in February was 0, which means he's going to get $750 in February. So what happens here is in April, he got $380, well, technically $400 of his annuity, plus he's still got the full SSI benefit, right? So he has extra money this month, right? $380 extra money this month. So then we move to the next month, May, and the same thing happens in May. So he still has this annuity of $400, which is countable of $380. He still is, would be eligible for an SSI check in May. And since he still would be eligible, he meets the eligibility criteria. His May SSI benefit is going to be based on his income in March. His income in March was 0. And so as a result, he gets $750. That's his SSI in May is $750. So he's getting extra and extra SSI in these 2 months. Okay? And then it's not until June that finally, because of this 2-month gap, right, so the same thing happens in June, but it's not until June that his SSI actually goes down. So the $380, he still has this annuity, which is $380. And so he meets the eligibility criteria. And since he meets the eligibility criteria, RMA applies, and so they're going to use his income from April. So his countable income in April is $380. And so that means his SSI check is going to be $370. And so now we finally have an adjusted SSI check. What happens on the other end is when this annuity stops, we still have this 2-month delay. So we're going to have 2 months where he has no annuity but a $370 SSI benefit. So these 2 months of extra SSI he got ideally would be stocked away so that if the annuity stops, he has that extra SSI to fill in, because it will be 2 months before it gets back to full. So I'm going to pause there. What questions do you have for me?
Molly, this is Wendy.
Hi, Wendy.
I have a question. When we're working with somebody and we're trying to figure this out, I'm still a little confused by it, but when we're trying to figure it out, it sounds great in theory, but Social Security doesn't always catch up to it. So what is the best way to explain it to somebody who's then still getting $750 after their budget month has caught up to their countable income? Because that's going to happen. I feel like working with Social Security, that's going to happen. Does that make sense? Is that that question makes sense?
Yeah, I think so. And if my answer is off the mark, then you'll know I misunderstood. But so for this to play out so that a person doesn't end up with an overpayment, they would need to make sure that they report by the income they receive in a given month by the 10th of the following month, and that the claims rep then gets that input into the system right away. And so what if the person's situation meets the RMA rules, then what you would say to them is when you begin working, or now that you started working, and this is assuming that they're reporting timely, then you could say to the person, it's going to take 2 months. It takes them 2 months to adjust your check. And if something happens to and so you're going to get extra SSI during those 2 months, just like you can see here on the slide in April and May. And so if you're going to get extra SSI on the front end, if something happens and you're not able to keep your job, or your job ends for whatever reason, your SSI check will get adjusted back to $750, but you're going to have 2 months of a delay before that happens. And so it's best if you stock away that extra SSI so that you have it there for those 2 months if that happens. Does that help, Wendy?
Yeah. I'm just trying to figure out how to explain this because it's really kind of, I guess I'm still a little shaky on it. That would be.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is, it's understandable that you're shaky on it. That's why I sort of said at the beginning, like, be prepared, but this is one of these things that you just have to come back and look at over and over. But if you can begin to understand the concept here, eventually you'll begin to understand why a Social Security letter is saying a person's benefit amount is what it is and why it adjusted when it adjusted. If the RMA rule applies to the person, then what it means, in short, is the SSI won't get adjusted for 2 months. It won't get reduced. It'll take 2 months for it to get reduced. And it's always going to be 2 months off. And it's not like that's something that's happening that's incorrect. It's just the way the system is designed, is that it's always 2 months off if RMA rules apply.
Thanks, Molly.
Yeah, you bet. This is a really dense concept.
Molly, this is Linnell.
Hey, Linnell.
I have a question. When they're looking at the current month, like when you were talking about March versus May, on that first check of like, would the person be eligible for a check at all based on the income in May?
Mm-hmm.
How do they determine that if I don't know my May income until June?
Yeah, they're assuming it.
Based on
so when you begin working, you report how much you're earning, right? And so at that point, they'll put an estimate in the system, and they'll go from there. So they're assuming that the RMA applies, and we're going to that you're eligible. And in the next slide, we're going to talk about, well, what happens if you aren't eligible in a given month.
Okay. So they're doing the current month based on projections, based on what I said my likely wages are going to be.
Yeah. Right. Mhm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then I've had sometimes where they end up doing the projection based on that instead of based on the wages that are actually reported for that month.
Yeah. Yeah. So they'll put an estimate in the system, and the purpose of putting an estimated earnings in the system is just to make sure that the check's going to get adjusted in case the person forgets to report their earnings one month or doesn't get it done timely, essentially to try to minimize overpayments. But then when the person stops working or they reduce their earnings, then that estimate on the record needs to be adjusted.
Yeah. Okay.
And ultimately, they will go back and they'll reconcile the record, and they'll put the verified earnings in, and the person, could end up due some money when they eventually do go back. But that's kind of a different concept, the idea of estimating. But they generally will do that, put an estimate in the system.
Oh,
yeah.
Thank
Molly.
you.
Mm-hmm.
Molly.
Is that Emma?
Oh, yes. One thing that ever since I've worked with Win, one thing I've been doing, you were talking about, they estimate, so when you stop working, they have to go back. Well, I'm sure everybody does it, but in case, one thing I've done ever since the beginning is I tell the person when you're no longer working, continue to report that 1 month and just report 0 and tell your date of stopping work, and that has been working. Social Security seems to really like it.
Yeah. So, and what in your example, Emma, you just gave an example of someone who just stopped working. Could you say that again?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because otherwise they would keep on assuming, and I've seen it before. They do this projection, and you look at the VPQI, it has the V or it has the E, so that's expected and verified, and they will just keep on going.
Right.
And even I've had people who tell me, I've gone to Social Security and we still get the check not fully, the full check. And then I've used that trick and I just say, okay, let's report with the normal way we would do it. And within 2 months, the check just comes. Yeah. I don't know, but it seems to work.
Yep. You got to report. Yep. Folks have to report when the job stops so that they get that estimate off the record or get it adjusted if the amount of earnings has changed. Yeah.
Molly.
Yeah.
This is Tara in South Dakota.
Hey, Tara.
And in my central part of the area, I see that a lot where they estimate whether a person's reporting or not for SSI. And they get underpayments, overpayments, and then they're literally to work. And then they don't believe me when I tell them that if they report that everything should straighten out in about 2 months. But we just keep trying.
Yeah. And I think that's going to differ from one local office to another, and how the claims reps are, how aggressively they're doing those averaging or those estimates, and how regularly they're adjusting and updating them. But ultimately, the person does need to report if they see if they're going to have a big change in their earnings, and if they stop working. Absolutely. Okay, I'm going to keep us going, if that's okay. Actually, it might be interesting to have a whole separate call about estimates and SSI, because it's an equally important topic in terms of managing the benefit once working. So in the scenario here, this whole concept of RMA, this 2-month adjustment period, that happens when the person would be eligible for a benefit, meets the criteria for benefit check eligibility in a given month, in the month that we're looking at for payment. So what I want to talk with you about now, because this happens when a person goes to work, what happens then if they earn so much that they're not going to have a benefit? They're not going to be eligible for a benefit check in a particular month. So I'm going along getting $750 of SSI, and I get a job, and this job's great, and I'm going to make $2,500 a month. When that happens, they don't do RMA. In that scenario, I don't meet the first criteria of RMA. Because based on my income this month, I would not be eligible for an SSI benefit this month. So RMA doesn't apply. So they have this other system called the transitional computation cycle, and the name is so painful. There are really 3 situations in which it can come up, and it's the middle one that's really what's relevant for you guys. On slide, what am I on? I'm in slide 6 here. The first and the third scenario, the first scenario is when you first become entitled to benefits, and we're not your role is helping people once they're eligible, not in the application process. So really that first bullet is something you're not going to run into a lot. And the third bullet is just sort of a rare situation. A formerly ineligible spouse becomes eligible. So let's not even go there. Just kind of let the first and the third go. What's really relevant for you guys is when you're working with someone who has become ineligible for an SSI benefit generally because of income. It could be because of resources too. And then they become eligible again. So just to clarify, if in a given month, if my income is so high I'm not eligible for a benefit check this month, they don't do RMA. I just clarified that. What happens is I'm actually not even due an SSI benefit that month. So my SSI benefit is based on my income that month, and it is 0. Now, the next month, if I become eligible again, if my income drops, then the question becomes, what month of income do they base my SSI check on? So, if you work with someone who goes above the break-even point with their income, and they have a period of ineligibility, technically it's 1619B, but they're in a period in which they are not eligible to receive the cash benefit. That's what I mean by ineligibility here, is they're not eligible to receive the cash benefit. If that happens for two or more months, and then a person does become eligible again, they don't use RMA. They use this process called the TCC. And the TCC, when they use the TCC, and this is important because you may work with people who go into 1619B status. And then after they've been working and they're in 1619B status, their earnings drop, and now they're due a check again. So the question becomes, well, what month is that check based on? So this TCC, it's a transitional computation cycle, they use this specific process for 3 months, and then it naturally moves the person back into the RMA. So the way it works is the first month you become eligible again for a benefit, the benefit amount you get is based on the income in that same month. So the budget month is the term that's used for the month that the cash benefit amount is based on. And I'm going to show you an example. This is hard to process by just looking at the words. but hang with me. And then the second month of this 3-month period, the benefit amount I get is based on the previous month, that first month of the TCC. And the third month is the same thing. My benefit is based on the first month of the TCC, which has then put me back into a 2-month gap. So it moved me back into the 2-month gap cycle, the RMA cycle. So let's look at an example on slide 8. So in our example here, we have Derek, and he didn't have any income. He was receiving the full $750 of SSI all the way through January. And then in February, he got a job. In February and March, he made $1,900 a month. And so those of you who've been doing this work for a while, you're probably thinking to yourself, okay, well, that's over the break-even point, so his SSI would be 0, right? So let's just keep going with the scenario details. And then in April, his wages dropped to $1,500, and then in May they dropped to $500, and then in June they're 0 going forward. So we got this great job, did a bunch of work in February and March, $1,900 each month, then it dropped to $1,500, and then it dropped to $500, and then he stopped working. So you'll see in January he has 0 countable income, and so that means he meets the RMA criteria that he would have been eligible to receive a benefit that month. And since he met the RMA criteria, the benefit amount he gets is based on November. In February, though, things change up a bit. In February, he got this job, and so he ended up with $1,900 of wages, which is $907.50 of countable income. Because of that, he doesn't meet the criteria to be eligible to receive a benefit check that month. So he doesn't meet that first criteria of the RMA. So they stop doing the RMA cycle. They don't do the 2-month gap. And since he is not eligible to receive the benefit check, like then he ends up receiving 0. That's how much his benefit is that month. So the benefit amount is based on February. And then the same thing happens in March. He has the same amount of income, and so he doesn't meet that first criteria of the RMA cycle, so his income is too much, so he's not eligible to receive the benefit amount. And so as a result, they use his income from March, and his SSI is 0. So essentially what I want you to get out of this is that this first part at least is we haven't hit the transitional computation cycle yet, so hang here with me. But what's happened here is that this person has so much in income, they're not due an SSI benefit. And when that happens, when they have so much income that they're not due an SSI benefit, that 2-month gap thing doesn't apply. The benefit check should just be 0 that month. And so it's these months where an overpayment is essentially going to be a given. You see what I'm saying? Like, you're going to get in February, Derek didn't know he was going to be making this much money on February 1st, right? So he got his job on February 5th. So he still got that full $750 of SSI. He wasn't due any of it, but he may have actually received it because it comes on April 1st, on the 1st of the month. But he wasn't due that money. And so when you work with anybody whose plan is to earn over the break-even point, then it's important to let them know that the months that they begin doing that level of work, that SSI benefit they get, they should set it aside because they're likely going to get a letter that says they need to pay it back. So we wouldn't want to tell Derek that this 2-month gap applies to him in February because it doesn't. and I'm just going to pause because I want that to try to sink in a little bit.
Molly?
Yeah.
Hi, this is Amy.
Hi, Amy.
Hi. I had a quick question. I'm working with a gal who she started working, and she's actually, this is pretty similar to what her situation is like. However, the first month when she started working, it wasn't over the break-even point. She would still be due like about, like $100 or $200 in SSI. And then the following month, she would be at that break-even point. However, Social Security said that the first month that she reported her earnings, she would not be due, and in fact, she would be overpaid in this instance, even though she reported that month. Like, she started working in April. She reported that she started working, and then they said that she was going to be overpaid for May, even though that hadn't been, she'd still be due a $200 SSI check.
Well, but in May, so what I hear you saying, and we got to use actual months here, otherwise it gets really confusing. So what I hear you saying is in April, she started working, but her countable income was below the break-even point, right?
Yes.
Okay, so RMA still applies to her. So what her benefit check for April should have been based on what month?
The previous two.
Right, February.
Yeah.
February, right? Okay. So then, but Social Security they knew how much she was going to be earning, and so they said, okay, well, for May, you're going to have so much income, you're going to be over the break-even point. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, so if she's going to be over the break-even point for income, they don't do RMA. She's not eligible this month, in the month of May. And so if she's not eligible, then the SSI check is just zero that month. And any SSI she got that month, she's overpaid.
But I guess my question is if she's already reported it out, like she's reported it, she's reported it, and they've already taken like an estimated wages, knowing that she's not going to be due any SSI checks.
Mm-hmm.
But they're saying, like, they already have that information in there, and they're already. She's saying she was told that she would be due the first month that her check would stop would be in June. If they're going off of estimated wages, why isn't that hit on in May?
So you're wondering why they didn't get her May check stopped? Is that what you're asking?
I guess I don't know what I'm asking now.
And that is the challenge with this process. Yeah. Well, I just want to make, because this is a great example, and this is just another example of what I'm talking about here. So just to reiterate, in April, we know her income is below the break-even point. Countable is below break-even, so RMA applies. So the amount she gets for April is based on February. Then we go to May. And when they look at the income for May, they have to do the first thing they have to say is, okay, well, based on the income from May, would she even be due an SSI check in May? And if the answer is no, if income is over the break-even point for May, then the answer is simple. There's no SSI benefit for May.
Okay, that's where I'm going. That's okay.
RMA applies. Or, I'm sorry, RMA does not apply, I was trying to say. Yeah.
Okay. I was kind of mixing these two that we were just talking about, mixing them up a bit. So I apologize. Thank you.
Oh, no worries. Yeah. And hopefully that was helpful for others to hear another example. So in this scenario, and this is a very real thing that happens for a lot of people we work with. They go along, they do a couple months of being above the break-even point, so they're not or shouldn't be getting the SSI. We've at least established now when countable income is above the break-even point, any month that happens, there should be no SSI payment that month. No SSI payment should have been paid, and if it was, it's an overpayment. So then the question becomes, what happens once the person is then due an SSI check again? And the whole RMA concept doesn't work after you've had this period of ineligibility because it's not fair in a way. I shouldn't even be using that term, but so let me just walk you through what happens. So in April, what happens is she drops her income. It goes, he drops his income down to $1,500, which is $707.50 of countable income. And so he technically meets the criteria for being eligible for an SSI benefit in the month of April here, right? Countable income below the break-even point. So yes, he would be due an SSI benefit in April. But they don't use the RMA process after a period of ineligibility. If they did use the RMA process, in April, his benefit amount would be based on February, which means he'd be getting 0 SSI. Instead, they use this 3-month transitional computation, the TCC. And what the TCC says is that this is the first month of the TCC. And this first month of the TCC, the SSI benefit amount, right here, this $4,250, the amount you get, it's based on the income from April. So after you've been ineligible for a period of time, then they use the income in your current month to calculate your SSI benefit for that month. So they're essentially, in a way, doing what they were doing when you were ineligible, right? They were basing the amount you're going to get on your current month's income. That's the first month of the TCC. The amount you're getting is based on your current month's income. The second month, May, his income dropped even further. He had $207.50 of countable income. So he does again meet the criteria for being eligible for a benefit. So there's 3 months of this TCC, and so he's in it. And so this second month of the TCC, he's in the second month of it. And in the second month of the TCC, they use April's income to calculate the SSI benefit. So they don't look at what the income was this current month. What they're doing is slowly getting Derek back to the RMA cycle. And so then by the time we hit June, his countable income is 0 in June, and so yes, he would be eligible for an SSI check this month. And so what happens in June is they use April, the income from April, as the amount of the SSI. So now what's happened is we are now back to the RMA cycle. Income from April was used to calculate June. And from here on forward, income from May will be used to calculate July. Oh, shoot, I just made it go away. Ah, sorry, that's my technology challenge. For those who are just on the phone, I was drawing and I hit a button and it erased it. So you can see what's happening with this 3-month TCC is it's slowly getting the person back to the RMA so that eventually we've got the 2-month gap again. They made it pretty complicated, didn't they? I'm going to show you one more example. The one thing I want to point out here is that it's kind of crummy about this situation is that and if this is too much, it's okay, but for those who are tracking some of this, it might be helpful to get this. In April, when he first becomes eligible again, the amount of income he has in April is going to affect what he gets for SSI for this month and the next 2 months, right? So he had pretty high countable income in April. So that means he's stuck with the $4,250 a month for all 3 months, regardless of the fact that his income drops, right? So that's kind of a bummer. If you change the scenario, though, if you look on slide 9, and we reverse it, and instead in April, he has really low countable income, which is giving him a $542.50 SSI check that month. With the TCC, they're going to use that income from April as the basis for his SSI check for May and for June. So even though in May he had higher countable income, he still ends up with a $542.50 SSI check. So he's benefiting in that situation. Now, it's okay if you feel like, holy cow, that's a lot to process. And as I've said in the beginning, ideally what you'll do is feel like you begin to get a little more of a grasp around it, even if you feel like you've only got 5 or 10 more % of an understanding of this. It's one of those things that's just good to chip away at because it unlocks so many mysteries. Just like your situation, Amy, like it just made it clear as day as to why the SSI claims rep was saying what they were saying. So it's a hard. These are hard concepts to get, but ones that are worth putting some brain power into, and also just being realistic that it just takes some time to process and look back over it over and over and over again.
This is
so
Sarah.
Yeah.
I just wanted to point out too that most of the time the clients don't care about any of this. They just want to know when their check is going to come back to, like they want to know how much am I going to get this specific time. So I think
Absolutely.
It's important to understand that, like, it would almost help to have another line in the table to show, like, the actual amount of the check. Because what we're going to see is we're going to see overpayments that are going to pop up for February and potentially March if the client doesn't report timely. And those overpayments are going to be payable in April, and the letter is maybe going to come out at the end of March. So all this stuff is going to happen, and I think that what the client's care is and concern is that, well, okay, so you're telling me I'm going to be eligible for a check in April, but understanding that they're actually not going to get paid that money until May or June, depending on how the field office is able to process it. So
and how quickly they report the change. Yes.
Right, exactly. So I think that is also what partially confuses the CWIC, because we're also trying to anticipate that question from the client, if that makes sense. So it's differentiating like eligibility months and then actual payment months, and that's kind of where the rub lies. And that's what I point out.
As a beautiful point. Beautiful. And I think when you can begin to wrap your head around how these things work, you can go that next step and begin to, you don't want to draw all of this out. You're really going to scare the person away from working. But as you begin to better understand these concepts, I think in particular, even the simplest thing, like recognizing that when someone's going to be over the break-even point, that the 2-month gap doesn't apply. They're not going to be due that SSI benefit on slide 9 for Derek on February. Whatever he gets, he needs to be prepared to need to pay that back. Versus telling the person, oh, there's this 2-month gap. So you guys just understanding those when the RMA applies versus the check stopping and the TCC eventually applying, that's huge. And how you relate that, which is exactly, I love where you're going, Farah, is very different from how we're talking about it right here. Yeah. I'm going to there are some other slides on here that are like just kind of extra for those who are really comfortable with this concept. There's exceptions to this, the TCC. and I'm not even going to spend time on it. I'm going to move us along. But if there's a one-time payment thing when you first become eligible for benefits again, they treat it differently. I don't really want you to worry your brain about that. For those of you who feel like you have a strong understanding of RMA and TCC already, then I'd be happy to talk with you about non-recurring income. And another exception just to be aware of is that they, in terms of how they count the COLA, that they count it essentially right away as soon as you begin receiving it. So there isn't a 2-month gap around that one. And really what I wanted to get to in the last few minutes, so I'm not going to bother explaining the example on 12 and 13 about the COLA. If you have some brain power and you want to better understand that, it's there. And I, of course, be happy to talk through it. But I do want to just take the last couple minutes and come back to sort of where Farah was going, which is what do you do with this information and how do you use this when you're talking with the folks you're serving? And so first and foremost, what I was trying to get at is ideally you're recognizing when that 2-month gap occurs and is supposed to occur versus when the person's just not supposed to be due the benefit at all and it should stop right away. And if that occurs and then they're due the benefit again, that there's this 3-month period where the benefit amount is for 3 months going to be based on the first month they were due that benefit again. Beginning to recognize when the different month for which payment is based is a great place to be. And if you don't feel like you have a handle on it right now, that's okay. Just keep chipping away at it. And as scenarios come up, like in Amy's example, just reach out and I'd be happy to help you think through it because as we all know, it's not until you start applying this information that it really begins to sink in. And then the other piece, which is also exactly where Farah is going, is helping the person. Really, what they want to know is, how do I stay a step ahead of this? How do I be prepared if there is going to be an overpayment, and how long is it going to take them to adjust the benefit? So, helping the person think through how do I make sure to report timely, what are they going to do to report timely, and even when they do report timely, recognizing when there's going to be a month or two where they're going to end up with more SSI than they're supposed to get. As we saw with the RMA, right, the first 2 months you have increased income, you continue to get the larger SSI benefit, but when and if that income drops down the road, you're going to have too little SSI for 2 months. So recognizing those points and preparing the person for those points is priceless and helps people feel more empowered and, just able to financially plan how to pay bills each month. It's really, really key for financial planning. So it certainly is appropriate to put information in the BSNA. I'm curious, did you guys just lose the Collaborate Ultra, or is it still there?
It's still here, Molly.
Oh, okay.
I
can
still see it.
Okay, great. Okay, super. So you certainly don't need to put a lot of information in the BSNA. Certainly if someone's going to be stopping their benefit right away, letting them know. If there's going to be this 2-month gap, letting them know. Really, though, these concepts aren't so much for putting in a BSNA. They're really for a discussion with the person to help them kind of come up with a plan for preparing for the benefit changing. So it's more of a discussion that you want to be prepared to have. So any final questions about this or thoughts about this?
Molly?
Yeah.
This is Rhonda, Dakota.
Hey, Rhonda. Yeah.
So in my experience, I don't see a specific pattern here at the office that I work with. Mm-hmm. And even when I review people's letters,
they can have different information in the same letter. For example, one page can say your March payment is figured out from your January income, and so on. But then in one of the pages, it will say your June income identifies how much your June SSI check is. It doesn't seem like there's a pattern. So my question is, this information, is this something that is universally used at all of the Social Security offices, or?
It is supposed to be, yeah. And it's all in the Palms. Yep.
Information will be helpful when I review people's letters.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a great opportunity for you to practice understanding RMA and the non-payment status, and then restarting the benefit and having that TCC kick in. So those letters will be a great opportunity for you to begin to apply some of this and process it and understand it. And just as always, let me know if you want help thinking it through.
And if there is inconsistencies in the letters or the different situations here in this office using this.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Molly.
Yeah. And there's Palms that back all of this up.
Great. Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions? I know we're at the top of the hour, but I don't want to leave anyone hanging. All right. Well, my hats off to you all for taking on an hour of TCC and RMA. I hope you feel a little wiser as a result of it. And as always, I look forward to hearing from you. So have a great day, everybody. Thanks for your questions. Bye-bye.